Listen to this. There is a new destination this election for both Vice President Harris and former President Trump. It's going on a podcast. CNN's Hadas Gold explores what they have said and how it might sway some votes. With all of that said, let's get into it.
Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump have been racing to sit in front of the biggest podcast microphones.
Madam Vice President Alex, welcome to Call Her Daddy.
It is good to be with you.
The newest media stars and their millions of listeners becoming some of the most important campaign stops.
This is going to be great.
I think so too, Mr. Trump.
This all my life.
As the media landscape shifts, so are the candidates as they scramble to target a younger and often hard-to-reach audience.
He knows you very well. He said, Dad, he's big.
Wow.
You're a big one.
That's cool.
So that's good.
What,
well, that's where it is nowadays, right?
Trump has been flooding the podcast zone, focusing on platforms aimed at the right and white men. Going on with Theo Vaughn, Nelk Boys, Logan Paul, Barstool Sports Bussin' with the Boys, and many others.
I like doing stuff like this. You know, I like it. I like conversation. I don't seem to get myself in much trouble. When she does it, every time she does it, they say she's stupid. She's stupid.
Meanwhile, Harris has been more selective, appearing on shows better known for their sex tips and celebrity gossip than news, like The Shade Room, All the Smoke, and most recently Call Her Daddy, where she talked about Trump's past comments on abortion.
Can you imagine? He is suggesting that women in their 9th month of pregnancy are electing to have an abortion. Are you kidding? That is so outrageously inaccurate.
Conversations on the podcast have a different approach than a traditional news sit-down, mixing in the lighthearted.
One of my guilty pleasures, especially when I'm on the road, are my Doritos.
Oh, what flavor?
Nacho. Old school, original.
OG,
Come on.
yeah.
Along with the politics.
We can live with the marijuana. It's got to be a certain age. Got to be a certain age to buy it. It's got to be done in a very concerted, lawful way.
Although with little to no fact-checking or follow-up.
We were ripped off by every nation in the world, and some of the worst rippers were our so-called allies.
Podcasts have become a major part of the media diet for many Americans, with 2/3 of adults under 30 listening in the past year. And even though many don't go to podcasts for their news, they trust what they're hearing. A stunning 87% say they expect the information on their podcasts to be mostly accurate. The candidates are clearly taking this to heart, with Reuters reporting that Vice President Harris is in talks to sit down with the popular and powerful podcaster Joe Rogan. Trump also announcing earlier his own interview with Joe Rogan is in the works.
He's got great confidence.
And Hadas joins us now. So who are Harris and Trump trying to win over with these podcast appearances, Hadas?
Well, they're trying to reach very specific audiences because the people who are watching things like cable news, no offense to our own network, any of the other networks, they tend to be these sort of baked-in voters. They already know who they're going to vote for. They're very informed news consumers. They're trying to go after people who might not be listening to these podcasts for news. They're listening to them for entertainment or for other reasons. And they're trying to motivate them to vote because this election will be so much about the margins, about the 10,000 votes here or there. And that's why it's really interesting to see when you look at the demographic breakdown of these audiences for these podcasts. I'll give you the example. Joe Rogan, 80% of his audience is male, and they tend to be young males. And that's why both of these candidates are trying to go on Joe Rogan and talk to him and get that audience.
All right, Hadas Gold, thank you so much.
President Obama was out there last week waving his finger at black men. When are Liz Cheney and Hillary Clinton going to wave their finger at white women? When are Bill Clinton and Joe Biden going to wave their finger at white men? Because 52% of white women voted for Trump in 2016. 55% voted for Trump in 2020. They all voted against their own interests. When the finger waving going to start at them?
Well, thank you for highlighting that. I do have the support of over 200 Republicans who worked for various administrations, including everyone going back to Ronald Reagan, to the Bushes, to John McCain and Mitt Romney, and including Liz Cheney. And I'm very proud to have her support. And I believe that many of them who may have voted for Trump before are supporting me because they know the stakes are so high in terms of our very democracy and rule of law. And
so the finger wagging should start today or tomorrow.
Well, I think what is happening is that we are all working on reminding people of what is at stake, and that is very important.
So as a employee of a mission-driven nonprofit bank, I appreciate the efforts in that bank. I work with Invest Detroit. But as chief storyteller of the city of Detroit, I spend a lot of time dispelling information about the city of Detroit. Yeah. And so I'm sure for those of us who are like me, if Donald Trump doesn't like Detroit so much, he's not welcome back. Now,
but okay, I don't want to interrupt you. I don't know if everybody knows what you're talking about. Okay, go on.
You can get into it. I just wanted to say that we know that there's been a lot of conversation about growing the middle class, but black men have been taken out of the workforce for a myriad of systemic reasons, from mass incarceration to racial bias, fear mongering. But we know that black men are not criminals. They are criminalized. And that has taken black men out of the home, has taken wealth out of the home. And so especially in a city with such high poverty, I've heard a lot about middle class, but I would love to hear more about stair-stepping from poverty into middle class so they can take advantage of the opportunities and the policies you're talking about.
That's right. And that's real. So, for example, the child tax credit. When we did it, when I first became vice president, we cut black child poverty by half. And when you deal with poverty for a child, that's about the whole family, right? When you look at the work that we have done that has been about dealing with prescription medication for our seniors, black people are 60% more likely to get diagnosed with diabetes. And when you look at what people are in terms of on the verge of bankruptcy because of medical bills and medical debt, that's very real. So us capping the cost of something like insulin and prescription medication, not to mention the work that I've been doing to ensure that medical debt does not get included on your credit score, because medical debt comes about because of a medical emergency. Nobody invites it upon themselves. And back to the point about history and the reality of life, we also know the real disparities around access to meaningful health care, which are more likely to result in people facing chronic illness and in medical emergency. So my work has been and included working to get medical debt not be on your credit score so that thing you did not invite upon yourself would not be the reason that you can't get a lease on an apartment or anything else. We have to deal with child poverty. We have to deal with poverty, period. And there are many specific ways to do it, including dealing with getting resources into the community that alleviate the burdens that hold people down. And but back to Detroit. Can you imagine? You go to a city and you say you want the votes of those people, and then you disparage the city.
Damn.
And that's what he did in Detroit. And he has a tendency to mention cities that either have a historically black majority population or
PRFM HD1.
All right, we've been listening for almost an hour long town hall, an audio town hall hosted by Charlemagne the God. We're going to continue to monitor this if it continues, although he just said he was wrapping it up. You've heard a lot of questions during this national radio town hall event. It was in front of an audience in Detroit, Michigan. I want to go to Detroit right now. CNN's Eva McKend is on the scene for us. Eva, first of all, you've been covering this campaign for us. What stood out to you from what we just heard over the past hour?
You know, Wolf, this was perhaps the vice president's most wide-ranging conversation on the campaign to date. She talked about building wealth in black communities. She answered a question on reparations, saying that the issue need to be studied. She talked about being a product of the black church, growing up in the black church. And she told voters that she is clear-eyed about the disparities facing certain communities, even though that she is going to be a president for the entire country. She also addressed misinformation as it related to her law enforcement background. There is, I think, the perception, at least in some corners, that she was especially punitive when it came to black men. And she told voters that is not so, that she actually was progressive as it related to prosecutions around marijuana, and that she has been a long-time supporter of legalizing marijuana. We also heard questions about foreign aid. The vice president said that she would continue to support America's position on the global stage, as well as support social programs that would help everyday Americans. So a wide range of issues that we heard from the vice president, and a unique opportunity to speak directly to black voters.
Yeah, it was a unique opportunity indeed. Eva, thank you very much. And among other things, she said, I'm going to win, but it's tight. She said, what's at stake right now is both profound and historic. And then she severely criticized Trump for all the recent things he's been saying. Eva, stand by. We're going to get back to you. I want to turn to our political experts who are joining us for some analysis right now. And Van Jones, you heard Kamala Harris lay out her agenda in great detail and speak directly and honestly to black Americans. What did you think? Is this going to move the needle? How important was this one event?
Look, first of all, A+. I don't know how many pluses you can put on a report card with an A, but that was just awesome. She did extraordinarily well. There's stuff going on, if you're not from the black community, you may have missed. When the pastor came off and at the end he said, God is good. She said every day, all the time. That is, if you don't think Kamala Harris is black, for her to know the way you answer a pastor when he says God is good, you answer all the time. They're trying to say online, if you don't understand this, that she's not black, she ain't really black, blah, blah, blah. She was comfortable in her skin. She was fluid. She talked about stuff that black folks really care about. She got to the prostate cancer that's going on. It's ripping us apart. She did a magnificent job. And my only thing is, put her out there all the time. Give her her own radio show. The more you listen to Kamala Harris, the more you understand that she is nuanced on policy. She does know how to make these connections between what people are going through. I just thought she did a fantastic job. That's the best she's done since she ripped Donald Trump apart on the debate stage.
She was indeed very, very impressive. And Jamal Simmons, I'm anxious to get your thoughts as well. Do you think the vice president did enough to address the concerns from black voters, especially young black men, who may be on the fence right now about voting in this election?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of different concerns that exist in the African-American community, particularly around Kamala Harris running. But I will tell you, black men should take a victory lap right now. These young black men who've been holding out and saying, I want to see more. I want to see something concrete. I want to know what your plan is. I want to know numbers. I want to see some real data. They should take a victory lap because they got that from the vice president. The vice president said, okay, fine. Is that what you want? Here you go. And she put out that economic opportunity agenda for black men. And I think now we can see it for whether it's 1 million, small business loans forgivable up to $20,000, focusing on healthcare things like prostate cancer and sickle cell that affect African-American men. There are all these little pieces in there that she has to try to get wealth, to try to help people do the pipelines for work, including for teachers, where you have 1 or 2% of the teachers in America are black men. I have a school-age kid right now who had an African-American kindergarten teacher who's the only black man in the entire elementary school teaching class. So I think this is something that's incredibly important for these kids and for black America. So I think they should take a victory lap. They held the feet to the fire of both sides, both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. And Donald Trump does not have the same kind of plan. He does not have a plan for African Americans. In fact, he wants to put tariffs on, which I think people have said are going to lead to taxes. So they should take a victory lap. And the person who asked that question, who said, is this just happening because of politics? Well, no, of course not. She's been working on this her career. When I was in her office, we were working on a Black Male Initiative. This is something that she's been working on for a long time. But they should actually recognize that that is the point of politics. The point of politics is you hold a politician's feet to the fire, they come to you with a plan, and then now you have something to mark them up against going forward for the rest of their administration. And last thing I'll say, African-American men need to know, now she's supporting them, she put out a plan for them. It's time for, I think, them to come back and support her and say, thank you for the plan, we'll vote for you, and we're going to hold you accountable to what it is you said during the campaign. Yeah.
Brian Lanza, I'm anxious to get your thoughts as well. What did you think, and what was your reaction to what we just heard from Kamala Harris?
Listen, I think the struggle that Kamala Harris has is obviously an economic struggle, specifically with men of color under 35. They sort of see her in the Biden administration as a path of hopelessness. They don't see a real hopeful future with their policies. And that's why President Trump is gaining support with that group, and that's why he continues to gain support. So it's not that Kamala Harris spent an hour talking to the black community, which I think is important, and I'm glad she's finally doing it and addressing some of their concerns. But they're looking for hope. They're looking for a change. They're looking for sequencing of their life that's different what it looks like now. And they see Donald Trump as that sequence, as that hopeful image. And it's not Harris and her economic policies. It's the fact that they lived under Donald Trump's economic policies for 3.5 years or 4 years. They remember what it felt like to have more money in their pocket. They remember what affordability felt like. It's funny to hear Kamala Harris speak about creating wealth for the black community. No politician has been more responsible for wiping out wealth to the black community than the Biden-Harris administration. So whether it's an hour or 10 hours, she still has a lot to account for, and her plans are just not going to, they're not going to cut it. They're not going to help the black community create wealth. They're not going to help the black community sort of move out and advance their community. We've seen it. She had the chance for the last 4 years, and she failed to do it.
Well, Gloria Borger's with us. Hold on. I want to get Gloria Borger's reaction first of all.
Well, look,
Kamala Harris really did focus a lot of her answers on the economic issues, on the economy. She talked about her agenda to invest in housing affordability. She talked about child care. She talked about a whole lot more. Go ahead.
And she talked about cutting childhood poverty in half, which is no mean feat. Look, I think she was very substantive. She spoke to the issues that she was directly asked about. But what was also interesting to me is that she managed to do that all the while taking on Donald Trump, all the while saying that he was weak, not a strong man, that he was trying to scare you, and that he incited a mob on January 6th. So in addition to talking about what she would do for the community and for the country, she also talked about Donald Trump as a human being and what he would not do, and what the Trump campaign is trying to do, which is use scare tactics about her. She didn't, talk about the way he is insulting her personally, calling her dumb and stupid and everything else, low IQ. She didn't have to do that, because I think her substantive answers to these questions really prove that she is anything but. And I think, she did a terrific job in talking to that audience and answering the questions that she was asked, which, if you look at Donald Trump's performance today at the Economic Club in Chicago, is just the opposite of what he did.
Van, I know you wanted to weigh in, so go ahead.
I see it differently than Brian, in that black wealth has actually gone up under the Biden-Harris administration, and also our unemployment rate is the lowest it's ever been. So I agree there were some good things that happened during the Trump administration, but I just think you're way overstating the case with what's happening with the black community. Now, we need more, and I agree very much with the prior statement that for African-American men to say we need concrete specifics and to get them, I think was great.
Folks say you come off as very scripted. They say you like to stick to your talking points, and some media says you have.
That would be called discipline. The reality is that there are certain things that must be repeated to ensure that I have everyone know what I stand for and the issues that I think are at stake in this election. Mm-hmm. And so it requires repetition. Some people say that until someone has heard the same thing at least 3 times, it just doesn't stay with you.
What did you think of that, Sherwin? She's saying fine. She didn't say fine, call it scripted, but she basically did. She said sometimes you got to say things 3 times till people hear you, and that is repetition and discipline, not being scripted.
That is precisely what it is. There are certain things that she needs to communicate to the American people over and over again, especially as they are still getting to know her. So her repeating the same things, while it might sound scripted, it very much so is discipline. If you compare her to the Republican nominee, who is incredibly unscripted, and a lot of times he doesn't make any sense, and he veers off of a script and has no coherent message. She is such a contrast to him. That is why she probably sounds scripted, because Donald Trump is anything but.
Well, Joe, if you're honest with yourself, I'm sure there's some times where you would appreciate if your candidate would be more, quote unquote, scripted.
Look, I think there's a few things happening here, right? I've said it many times on this network. Vice President Kamala Harris. She wants to have her Kate and Edith too. She wants to have all the good things that come from the Biden administration. She wants to leave all the baggage of the Biden administration behind her. I think if you're just looking at the core issues pertaining to the black community, the civil rights issue of our time is education. Democrats have nominated a woman who is against school choice. They have a vice presidential candidate who is against school choice. And you have the gatekeeper for a large voter bloc that didn't ask any real questions about the civil rights issue of our time. To say that we have schools where 80% of black children cannot read at proficient levels all across this country. And so it is a scourge that is preventing black men from getting the tools they need in their young life to move forward. And I think if there are a lot of black people who are saying Democrats have told us that Donald Trump is terrible, but I'm not going to allow my vote to be taken hostage by a party that continues to not deliver results every time I place my trust in their hands.
Sherwin, I'm curious what you think. You know, Joan Costin was on last night, and she was making a similar point to Joe. Obviously, you know, not from a political point of view, but she's been studying the right-wing movement in this country. But sort of her point was that in Black America, people now feel that they can vote for who they want to. And that for many is a shift from how they felt before, that there was sort of only one way that you were allowed to go. I'm curious if you see it that way, Sherwin, and if you think that that's a good thing. You may not like the way some of them are going, but do you support the fact that there is now a freedom, more than there used to be, to vote for who you want?
Of course, but African Americans know you vote for a party that actually has a concrete agenda for you. The only plan that Donald Trump has for the African American community is allowing police complete immunity and giving police an hour to make things really bad. The only plan that Donald Trump has for the black community is to take away our health care by reducing and eliminating the Affordable Care Act. The only plan that Donald Trump has for the black community is suspending the Constitution. So yes, I think it's wonderful that we have choice as African Americans who we vote for, but we know that a lot of our progress that has been gained has come through voting and voting for the right party and voting for a party that actually has a plan. And the Republicans offer nothing. Donald Trump still has sketches of a plan. And this is a man who was president for 4 years and literally did nothing but hurt black employment, rather, hurt investments into the African American community, pretended that COVID did not exist. And the other thing is Republicans in the House and in the Senate have also helped Donald Trump be obstructionists. So when my friend Joe talks about the Democrats not being worth our vote, the Republicans have offered nothing but taken us back to a time that was no good for us anyway.
He did have a record low for black unemployment.
I would just simply say that to that point, right? I think we have to dispense with some of the talking points here. Certainly, there is a fair way to interpret it and to interpret facts, irrespective of whether you're a Republican or Democrat. The fact remains, pre-COVID, we had 7 million new jobs created. We had record low unemployment for black Americans. And I think even if you move beyond, all the conjecture, when you look at what black men are really moved by, they're moved by the fact that the Democratic Party is not actually treating them fairly, that you had the only black Republican man in the Senate who ran for president being called the equivalent of a slave that Harriet Tubman should have left behind. And no one lost their job and not a single person was fired. And so I appreciate that Sherwin says that it's good to live in America where black men can voice their opinion independent of somebody telling them how to do so. But it is quite clear that from many people on the cable news that they have been given license to talk crazy and out of their neck about black men who are not interested in voting for Kamala Harris. And I think, unfortunately, for not just the Democratic Party, but America, those chickens might come home to roost on November 1st.
All right, thank you.
Donald Trump hoping to capitalize on voters' concerns over the economy in the final sprint to the White House.
The most beautiful word in the dictionary is tariff.
Sitting down with Bloomberg's editor-in-chief at the Chicago Economic Club for an at times contentious interview over his economic proposals.
The markets are looking at the fact you are making all these promises. People like the Wall Street Journal, who's hardly a communist organization,
but you don't know.
They have criticized you on this as well. You are running up enormous debt.
What does the Wall Street Journal know? I'm meeting with them tomorrow. What does the Wall Street Journal know? They've been wrong about everything. So have you.
The former president again refusing to commit to accepting the 2024 election results while continuing to falsely claim there was a peaceful transfer of power after his 2020 defeat.
And it was love and peace.
Trump also would not say whether he'd spoken to Russian President Vladimir Putin since leaving office.
Can you say yes or no whether you have talked to Vladimir Putin since you stopped being president?
Well, I don't comment on that, but I will tell you that if I did, it's a smart thing.
With just 3 weeks to go, Trump also seeking to broaden his appeal among women voters, with polls showing a wide gender gap in his matchup against Vice President Kamala Harris.
Women love my policy, but they don't like me.
The former president participating in a Fox News town hall with an all-female audience in Battleground, Georgia, before holding a rally with supporters in Atlanta as early voting begins in the Peach State.
Let's not do any more questions.
This comes after Trump cut questions short at a town hall in Pennsylvania last night, instead swaying to music on stage for nearly 40 minutes. Shortly after, Kamala Harris taunting Trump, the vice president writing, quote, "Hope he's okay." It's just the latest in the back and forth between the two candidates as Trump faces public calls from his Democratic rival to release his medical records, after the White House released a letter summarizing Harris' medical history over the weekend.
He's not being transparent, so check this out. He refuses to release his medical records. I've done it. Every other presidential candidate in modern era has done it.
In an overnight post on social media, Trump baselessly attacking Harris's medical history, saying the vice president is, quote, dying to see his cholesterol, while claiming to have, quote, put out more medical exams than any president in history, despite not releasing basic information that presidential candidates traditionally make public.
And there's also been a back and forth between Harris and Trump over releasing cognitive tests or taking cognitive tests in order to be president. Just really quickly, we are here in Georgia. Early voting has begun today, and I'll tell you, we're here at this event, and there are a lot of people, despite what Donald Trump has said about early voting, who are here wearing stickers that say, I voted. Wolf?
All right, Kristen Holmes on the scene for us in Atlanta. Kristen, thank you very much. Our political experts are back to break all of this down for us. And Brian Lanza, first to you. On Trump's spending last night about 39 minutes of that town hall, swaying to several songs, including Ave Maria twice, YMCA. How do you explain that? Even if it was just lighthearted fun, is that the best approach with just 3 weeks to Election Day?
Listen, I think what you saw last night was two medical emergencies taking place. And, Donald Trump giving the time for the emergency responders to come in and handle that. And so he played music while those medical emergencies were taking place. I get it, the Harris campaign wants to try to paint something nefarious that took place, but he just didn't think it was appropriate while paramedics were dealing with medical emergencies. I thought that was very empathetic of him. Now, listen, we want to focus, on the economy. We want to focus on inflation. We find it rather silly that we're having conversations about Donald Trump being respectful during a medical emergency. Let's have Harris talk about the issues that are actually going to have an impact on people's lives. Let's talk about immigration, which is having a devastating impact, on our communities, our sanctuary cities positions. But I really think talking about Donald Trump, being respectful while a medical emergency took place is not a good use of Harris's time or probably even this network's time.
And let me get Gloria to weigh in. What do you think, Gloria?
Well, I think, with all due respect to Brian, the medical emergencies were over. Kristi Noem was ready to go back to questions. There were, in the prompter, it said you can take a couple more questions or something like that. And Donald Trump just decided he didn't want to. And he'd rather play music and that, be on the stage and dancing. Now, maybe that's his version of a joyful campaign rather than a dark campaign. But, I think it was his choice, and the emergencies had been taken care of. I think at the beginning, yes, they played music. But I think as it went on, it was his choice.
Van, what did you think?
Well, I just think there's something wrong with this guy. I mean, he's getting more and more disinhibited in general. And I don't mean this in a I'm trying to call this honestly. If we had a candidate that was behaving this way, we would acknowledge it. In fact, when there were concerns about Biden, I spoke out and others spoke out. What's crazy is the way that Republicans just won't acknowledge the obvious. This is not the same Donald Trump from even 4 years ago. He's way more disinhibited. He does way more bizarre, weird stuff. He's way more angry. He's incapable of answering questions. He's slurring his words. He's doing all kind of weird stuff. And I'm not trying to be like weird. I know it's like the big buzzword of the summer. I just mean this is weird. That was weird. He's sitting up there doing that's weird, man. So if we had a candidate doing that, I think people would be very, very concerned, and I'm concerned.
Jamal, Kamala Harris has been ramping up her attacks on Trump in recent days, including calling him unhinged. but is this kind of erratic behavior from Trump already baked in for voters?
You know, I don't think so. You know, at one point, voters knew a lot about Donald Trump being unhinged because they saw him on TV every day. They heard him. I think what Kamala Harris and the vice president's team are doing right now is reminding people of the Donald Trump they used to know, right? That they maybe have escaped because they haven't been watching his rallies on TV all the time. They haven't been listening to him on radio. And so now she's showing them at the rallies. So like, listen, you don't have to take my word for it. Look right here, play the clip. And then she shows Donald Trump being erratic on stage. Listen, I think there's a real concern, as Van just listed, about what's going on with this president. But I think we also have to think like maybe this is who he really is. And when he says that he's going to treat people like enemies of the state and send the National Guard out to go round people up like Adam Schiff, in the Justice Department, I think that we have to take him very seriously. And the vice president wants people to take him very seriously because it's not just about what he did in the past. It's about what he says he's going to do if he gets back into the Oval Office.
It was interesting, Brian, that we just heard Trump say that if he did, in fact, speak with Vladimir Putin, it would be a smart thing. But as you know, a lot of national security experts have actually said the exact opposite, and that it could be actually illegal. So was that the right answer from Trump?
Listen, a lot of national security folks also thought Donald Trump stepping in Nord Stream 2 was a bad mistake and that we should let it happen. So we have to have real concern when national security folks weigh in. You had over 100 national security folks from the Clinton-Obama administration weigh in on Hunter Biden's laptop, and they lied about that. So we have to be skeptical when national security experts come in and say something. But at the end of the day, you know, what ends this war in Ukraine is going to be relationships. It's going to be relationships that President Trump has with President Zelensky, and it's going to be a relationship that President Trump has with the Russian president. But if you also step back and look at the chessboard in a geopolitical way, if we're ever going to be able to confront China, we're going to need the help of we're going to need the help of Russia. And so, you know, Donald Trump is playing long ball. He's not going to be distracted by Democrats calling Russia, Russia, Russia all over again like Clinton did and lied to the American people. He's going to be focused on, you know, confronting the real challenges of tomorrow. And that's China. And the only way you confront China is by bringing in Russia to the loop and having a coalition there to confront China.
All right, guys, good discussion. We'll continue this discussion very quickly. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's not the only way we confront China. We also confront China by making sure everybody in America is leveled up and ready to compete, that every kid in America has a chance to be able to do science and technology and math. And the way that Donald Trump treats other people who are different than him, other immigrants, is not the way that we make this country competitive to compete with everybody else on the planet.